This past week was Robert Munsch's birthday, so I thought, let's talk about the Canadian bestseller. He was born in 1945 in Pittsburgh and was one of 9 children. For years he struggled at school, and he almost flunked every single grade up to grade 5, and he kind of figured that teachers just pushed him along out of fear that, his younger brothers would keep surpassing him. He was not great at math, and he was definitely not a great speller, but he did love poetry. Eventually he would study to become a Jesuit priest, as he was from a Catholic background, and did that for about 7 years before deciding that it was not his calling. When he started working at a daycare, that's when he realized he could get kids to be quiet if he would tell them stories. He also met his wife working at the daycare, which is super cute. His first story that he ever came up with was a story he wrote in Teachers College in 1971, The Story of Mortimer, which is one of the most popular books and has sold over 3 million copies. Eventually, though, he did get a job at the University of Guelph in Canada, and so they moved. While there, he was encouraged by his boss's wife, who was a librarian, who had heard him telling stories to children to, maybe look at publishing something. He was kind of, wishy-washy about it, but eventually his boss was like, no, you should publish. And he was like, okay, boss, got it. He submitted his first story, which was The Mud Puddle, and received over 9 rejections, but eventually it was picked up. This also has sold millions of copies as well. My favorite story, of course, I'll bring up a little bit later, which is The Paper Bag Princess. It's this. He would just show up at schools and just give talks and tell stories, and it's whenever somebody would send him a letter, he'd be like, look, I got your letter, I'm here. It could be a year later, but he'd eventually come. He traveled all across Canada, daycare, schools, festivals, and of course he incorporated all the children that he met into his stories. Every story was about someone he knew. Like the story with Paper Bag Princess, for instance. Elizabeth was this girl who threw her coat onto the ground and kind of expected someone to just pick it up. He also loves cosmology, which I think is great. And some of his books are actually self-autobiographical. So the first one would be Love You Forever, which was published in 1986 and was a memorial to 2 stillborn children that they had. It was a bestseller 3 years in a row for Canada for storytelling and has sold over 18 million copies. Another story, which is Mermal, is also somewhat self-autobiographical, which is about a trucker who adopted a baby. Purple, Green, and Yellow is also reflective of Robert, as it kind of, for him, it was about his battle of depression. And he also keeps a dragon sculpture in his home, which symbolizes, battling with depression, as he was diagnosed with OCD and as a manic depressive. Every year he receives over 10,000 letters from fans and has published his book in over 30 different languages, including Indigenous languages, worked with Indigenous writers and illustrators. Robert Munsch is just a Canadian legend. It's amazing. Another story I remember reading growing up is that one, I Have to Go, which is, I think every Canadian has been in that situation growing up, where you're covered in many, many layers of snow gear that your parents force you to go in, and you absolutely hate wearing, snow pants, and gotta go at the last second. It's definitely a children's thing, which is sweet. My favorite story, as I said before, is The Paper Bag Princess, which was published in 1973. The story originally had a bit of a different ending, but Robert decided to change it because it seemed a little violent. Basically, the story about Princess Elizabeth, who fancied and was destined to marry Prince Ronald. Now, Ronald seemed all charming and handsome, and then one day a dragon showed up, as dragons do, and burnt the castle down, and took Ronald and flew off. The reason he wrote a princess as the heroine rather than the prince who goes and rescues, he was getting complaints from families saying, you don't write about female, it's always a prince rescuing a princess. And he was like, yeah, you're right. let's do something different. Let's have it Elizabeth. So when the dragon burns down the castle, her clothes burn off, and she has nothing to wear but a paper bag. So she follows the path of destruction that the dragon had left, which is burnt and bones, unfortunately, and comes across his cave. Knocking on the door, the dragon kind of dismisses her, saying, like, I'm really tired, can you just, like, come back tomorrow? And she's like, and then she starts to, like, flatter him, saying, well, you know, I've heard that you can burn down a lot, like, hundreds of forests with, like, one breath. And he's like, yeah, I can. So he has to prove it, because dragons can be kind of influenced and tricked easily. So he starts burning down the forest, and she's like, wow, do some more. So he does some more. And then suddenly he's out of fire. He's out of breath. He has no more. She's like, I also have heard that you can fly around the world in 10 seconds. He's like, yeah, that's true. Flies off. Comes back 10 seconds, and he's exhausted. He flew around the world. She's like, do it again. So, of course, he goes around and flies around, but it took 20 seconds that time. And by the end of that, he's exhausted. So he collapses and falls asleep. And she's like, hey, dragon. Nothing. Hey, dragon, in his ear, and nothing again. And she's like, that's my cue. Goes, rescues the prince. The prince looks at her and goes, come back tomorrow or something when your outfit is way better. And she calls him a bum, and they don't get married, and she just kind of goes away. In my mind, for whatever reason, I forgot that was the ending, and I just naturally assumed that the prince was eaten by the dragon by Princess Elizabeth's encouragement. You know, we remember what we want to remember. Anyways, to Robert Munsch, who gave us so many amazing children's stories, and happy birthday, Robert. And if you'd like to subscribe, take a look at some more videos, please like and follow. As well, check out my Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you want to hear some Star Wars content, you can hear me talk about the Legends Expanded Universe on Legends Library, which is on the Coffee with Kenobi network. Right now, Keith? Yes. Thanks.